Hello, good evening. My name is Emma Hughes. I am the Diversity and Inclusion Officer for Middle Temple Young Barristers Association, also known as MTYBA. I'm also Head of Mentoring for Bridging the Bar. We are so delighted to be celebrating Black History Month again at Middle Temple. This has now become an annual event, an annual qualifying session, and we have a really fantastic evening planned. We will have a fantastic performance by Emmanuel and Elliot. We have a warm welcome, firstly from Master Treasurer, and then we will hear from our esteemed panel, which feature archivist Barnaby Bryan, and he has engineered the incredible exhibition that you see here this evening, which celebrates Black and ethnic minority members of the Inn throughout history. And some of those people are here this evening: Master Lane Banton, Victoria Makungu, Stephen Liu, and unfortunately Master Ndawjai is not able to be here, but he sends his apologies. We'll then hear from our fantastic panel, Ashley Adams of the Equal Justice Initiative in America, then Master Elaine Banton of 7 Bedford Road Chambers, Dr. Louise Hewitt of the Innocence Project London, Abimbola Johnson of 25 Bedford Road Chambers, and Crystal Marshall, who's a talented artist who's currently exhibiting at the Saatchi Gallery. There is an incredible amount of work that is being done at the bar to enhance diversity and equality, and you'll hear more about that from our various speakers this evening. And there are numerous initiatives who are fighting the good fight, such as BME Legal, Black Women in Law, and Bridging the Bar, to name but a few. Some of you will already know about Bridging the Bar, but for those of you who don't, it was a newly formed charity that formed in 2020, and it specifically tries to create work experience opportunities for people from underrepresented backgrounds. We had a very successful first year, thanks to the generosity of the bar, and we were able to accommodate a mentoring program, which paired 75 mentees with 75 mentors in their chosen area of practice that they aspire to. They were given guidance and help on scholarship interviews and pupillage interviews, and those events were recorded so you can access them on YouTube. We also have secured 75 partner chambers now. We provided 133 mini pupillage placements, and that is increasing. And we launched an internship with the Supreme Court and the Law Commission. So it's been a really, really exciting year, and a huge thanks to my fantastic colleagues who have put all the hard work in to make that possible. I really encourage those of you who haven't had the opportunity to engage in any of those programs to apply again this year. I'm really honoured to be co-hosting this event with a fantastic colleague and MTSA President Victoria Makungu, who you'll hear from shortly. And I really wanted to extend thanks to the MTSA Vice President Samuel, who was instrumental in planning this event, but unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, is not able to be here in person this evening. But he is attending online and has kindly prepared some words for us. So Samuel, over to you.
Thank you, Emma. Good evening, everyone. Once again, my name is Samuel Owusu Ansah. I'm your Vice President for the Middle Temple Students Association. I'm very delighted to be a part of the Black History Month. And indeed, this evening is going to be fantastic, as we have our Master Treasurer featuring to give us a welcome address. And with a great panel of speakers prepared, I know this discussion will be very educative and informative.
Also known as Andrew Hockhauser QC, is a member at Essex Court Chambers. He practices in Chancery and the Queen's Bench Division. He is also an honorary counsel to Western Abbey, chair of the Samuel Cotterill Trust, chair of Paintings in Hospitals, and a governor of the University of Arts London. He is also a deputy High Court judge and ticketed, as I said previously, in both Chancery and the Queen's Bench Division. He is also a chartered Institute of Arbitrators. So without further ado, Master Treasurer, please welcome.
Well, what a privilege to be invited to speak tonight. As I look at these faces in the hall, it's so nice to have everybody back. We have now had about 2 weeks of events, and it's like a feast after a famine. Because being treasurer for the first 6 months of this year was not the best. And I'm making up for lost time. And this is one such event. It is a real honor to be invited by Emma and Victoria to attend this fantastic event marking Black History Month. And I really want to thank everybody at MTYBA and the MTSA for bringing me along tonight. I arrived at Temple Tube this evening, and as many of you may know, the Transport for London has renamed the tube map after Black people of distinction. And tonight, Temple Tube is John Denman. Now, if you haven't seen this map, you really should do so, because it has a name for every single tube station. I just have to say that I was a bit disappointed that they chose a sailor from Nelson's Navy for Temple Station, when look around at the talent on the wall, they could have chosen any one of these barristers to honor that particular station. Now, this exhibition has just opened, and to be honest, I saw it for the first time tonight and haven't really had the opportunity to go round and take every picture in, although I've had a couple of snapshots with some of my favorite people. Victoria's is still to come, but you're right down at the end there, so I haven't grabbed you yet. This is the result of a recommendation of a very important working party that was set up this year. It was chaired by Masters McGowan and by Master Elaine Banton, who is going to be speaking to you shortly. And it was on race, equality, inclusion, and anti-racism. And I really would like to reiterate my thanks to every member of that working group for their significant efforts in raising awareness of the many challenges that so many of our ethnic members have faced over the years. To be frank, the report that they produced was disturbing, in part to read of some of the patronizing incidents that have taken place in this inn over the years. And I wrote, as a consequence, to every member of the inn, referring them to the report and apologizing for those incidents that occurred in the past. And in that letter, I said as follows, which was written in June: to live up to its ideals, as we set out in our statement of values, we have to work towards the inclusion and equal treatment of everybody, regardless of any protected characteristic. We want to do better for our members. And as a result, we have set up a diversity and inclusion standing committee, and that is going to follow through with an agenda of training and support and visibility that the working group has recommended. I mean, I am absolutely delighted that we have been able to install these images of extraordinary people, from the trailblazing Barbadian Edward Craig Haynes in 1842 to many faces tonight, including our immediate past MTSA President, Victoria. She has been truly wonderful in her role, and she is certainly one to watch. So could I ask you to give her a big round of applause? There are many other distinguished individuals who have called the inn their professional home. They have come from all over the world, and it is my profound hope that all Middle Templars strive to ensure that everybody, no matter what their background, what their education, what their color, what their sexuality, is equally welcome here. As Sarah Mullally, one of our masters, the Bishop of London, the first female Bishop of London in all its history, reminded us in her lecture earlier this year when she quoted from the sermon of a Black ordinand, Augustine Tanner Inn. He said as follows, and the words resonated with me: accessibility is being able to get into the building. Diversity is being invited to the table. Inclusion is being given a voice at the table, and belonging is having your voice heard at the table. This is your inn. This is your home. You belong at our table, and we hear your voice. So many congratulations on this fantastic event. I hope it will become an annual one, and I hope you all have a fantastic evening. Thank you very much.
Oh, we are feeling the love tonight. Thank you so much, Master Treasurer, for your kind words. And leadership, I truly believe, works from the top down. So as you can see with our fabulous Master Treasurer and his efforts to continue to promote and drive diversity, equality, and inclusion, you are in the right space. So just a little bit more in regards to our exhibition. It will be on display from October through to December. And it is displaying fabulous Middle Tempers from 1842 until present day. And I would now like to welcome up our archivist, Barnaby Bryan, so that he can elaborate a bit more. So please welcome up Barnaby.
Thank you, Victoria. Good evening. It's really wonderful to be here speaking to all of you and everyone at home this evening. I'll keep it brief, as you don't need to hear me wittering on when there are so many more amazing speakers and performances to come. I will just say a few words about this exhibition, which, as Master Treasurer said, was one of the recommendations of the IN's Race, Equality, Inclusion, Anti-Racism Working Group established last year. The exhibition celebrates, among other things, nearly 180 years of Black history at the Middle Temple. It's difficult to say with absolute certainty who the first Black member of this inn was. The records we have of admissions of new students are sparse and formulaic, and more so the further back one goes, and often we have little more than a named address. However, external sources can help in our efforts to uncover and illuminate this history. In early 1843, a story appeared in an English local newspaper, which reported that a young man of colour is now keeping his terms for the bar, being a member of the Honourable Society of the Middle Temple. The article continued, what a proud example it is for our brethren on the other side of the Atlantic to see this young man dining in the ancient hall. This item of journalism, which was discovered, as is so often the case while looking for something else entirely, was a vital clue. And we have now been able to identify this young man, as Master Treasurer mentioned, as Edward Cragg Haynes. Born in Barbados in 1821, a descendant of enslaved people, Haynes was admitted to the inn in late 1842. And it's in fact thanks to the work of a project called African Stories in Hull and East Yorkshire that we now know more about his family background and about his life. He travelled to England in 1839, enrolling at King's College London, round the corner, before joining the inn 3 years later. Our records show that he did indeed dine in hall as a student in 1843, just as the press reported. However, he seems to have changed course entirely and was admitted in 1844 as a student at Trinity College in Cambridge, where he graduated in divinity 4 years later. And he went on to be ordained as a priest, as it happens, by Samuel Wilberforce, Bishop of Oxford and son of the abolitionist William Wilberforce, and moved up to the parish of Swinefleet in East Yorkshire in 1855, where he married, became a much-loved local vicar, and established a school. And he is depicted in our exhibition and in this image here, alongside his wife Henrietta and some of their pupils. And while he may not have gone on to be called to the bar and have a career in the law, his is a remarkable and unique story nonetheless, and we are proud to call him the earliest known Black Middle Templar. In 2019, we celebrated the centenary of the first admission of a woman to an Inner Court, who joined the Inn here on Christmas Eve in 1919. And 10 years later, Stella Jane Thomas may have been the first Black woman to be admitted to this inn. Born in Nigeria, she travelled to the UK in 1929, joining the University of Oxford to study law and enrolling at the Middle Temple. While a student, she found time to become a founding member of the League of Coloured Peoples, a civil rights organisation founded in London in 1931 by Harold Moody. And she was an energetic and committed activist. She was also an active member of the West African Students' Union and starred in a play by the Jamaican poet and activist Una Marcy. Two of her brothers were also members of this inn. Her elder brother Stephen went on to become the first Chief Justice of the Midwestern region of Nigeria, and her brother Emmanuel was the first Black African to be commissioned as an officer in the Royal Air Force. Quite a high-achieving family. And called to the bar in 1933, perhaps the first Black African woman to be called, she joined the Sierra Leonean bar as the first woman lawyer in West Africa, and later became the region's first female magistrate. And one more story I want to highlight is that of Johnny Smythe. Born in Sierra Leone in 1915, then a British colony, he enrolled in the Royal Air Force at the outbreak of the Second World War, flying as one of the first Black airmen in the service, before he was shot down over Germany in 1943, spending the next 18 months as a prisoner of war at Stalag Luft. After the war, he worked for the Colonial Office with responsibility for looking after the welfare of demobilized pilots from the Caribbean and Africa. And as part of this job, he found himself called upon to defend a man facing a court-martial. And the presiding judge was so impressed with his defense that he suggested a legal career. And so Johnny joined the Middle Temple as a student in 1947. And he found time, alongside his studies, to make history in 1948, when he served as the senior official on the Empire Windrush. And following his call to the bar in 1951, he returned to Sierra Leone, where he excelled in the legal profession, going on to become a QC and later rising to be Attorney General, as one does. And so those are just three of the individuals whose photographs hang on the walls around the hall, whose achievements and stories are celebrated in the exhibition, which will also be available online to members and friends around the UK and around the world. And just before I wrap up, I want to thank the others who've been involved in curating this exhibition, Masters Bantam and Sapnara, the Under-Treasurer Victoria Wallace, as well as my colleague Francesca Tate, who undertook much of the research in identifying the historical members, Middle Templars, who we've included. But while I am, I hope, justifiably proud of what we've achieved, it's vital that this isn't an end, but a beginning. And I say that for two reasons. Firstly, because there is so much more historical work to be done, both in uncovering more individual stories like these, more achievements, more struggles that have been hidden, and also in understanding more broadly the wider context, the social networks, the experience of studying at the inn, in the law of life in London, the background against which these individuals have made history, because none of this has happened in a vacuum. But secondly, because history is still being made. This display may stretch back to 1842, but it continues right to the present day. And the stories unfolding today, the challenges being overcome, the achievements being won, and all of those to come. Everyone here today is making history. And there are so many more stories to be told and to be heard and to inspire generations to come as these do today. And so it's my sincere hope that this exhibition simply represents the beginning of our work to study, illuminate, and celebrate Black history at the Middle Temple. Thank you.
Barnaby, I just want to say thank you so much for all the hard work that you have done in creating this exhibition. I feel really proud to be a Middle Templar, to see this on our walls. It's really, really inspiring. So thank you so much. And thank you to the working group who've done amazing work behind the scenes. It's really wonderful as well to have some of the people who are actually featured in this here this evening, not just Victoria, but Master Elaine Banton, who you'll hear from later, Stephen Liu, both of which are really lovely, kind individuals. I really encourage you to take the time to talk to them this evening, both of which have helped me on my journey in order to get pupillage, countlessly there on the phone and doing mock interviews and looking over applications. So I'm thankful so much for you guys. It's wonderful to hear about the rich history, Barnaby, that we have at Middle Temple. And as I've said, I feel really proud of that. So without further ado, our next speaker is Ashley Adams. She is an attorney in the US. She will be featuring via Zoom, because she of course was not able to be here in person this evening. So Ashley is a staff attorney for the Equal Justice Initiative. And this is an initiative that exists in America and was founded by Brian Stevenson, who is a criminal practitioner over there, and the author of the best-selling novel, Just Mercy, also been made into a popular film, which I'm sure some of you may have seen. We are really, really lucky to have Ashley here this evening. She graduated from the University of Tennessee College of Law in 2011. Prior to that, she was in the EJI, which is the Equal Justice Initiative, since 2017. And before that, she was an assistant and public defender and district court supervisor for the Tuscaloosa County Office of Public Defending. She represented Indigenous clients with Jefferson County Public Defender's Community Law Office in Birmingham, Alabama, and conducted civil litigation as an associate attorney. So welcome, Ashley Adams.
Hello, it's so nice to be with you all. I'm so glad to be here to speak with you all on behalf of the Equal Justice Initiative. I've worked at EJI, which is what we call it for short, since 2017. And the organization itself is over 30 years old. So I have been here for the most recent part of its history, but EJI is a private nonprofit law firm that defends people here in the United States, specifically Alabama. We defend people on death row, and we've done that since 1989 when we were founded. We also defend people who were sentenced to die as children, which is what we define children as people under the age of 18. So we defend people who were sentenced to die in prison as children. And we also have a project dedicated to prison conditions. And I'll go into a little bit about, each of those projects very quickly. So the death penalty here in the United States, we're one of the few countries that still exercises the death penalty. And while some states, we have 50 states, while some states have abolished the death penalty, there are some states, specifically in the South, the Southern United States, that still practice the death penalty, that still executes people. And Alabama is one of those countries. And when Brian founded this organization in 1989, Alabama accounted for about 25% of the executions that were happening. And that was mostly because of racism and bias against people who were poor. And what we saw was that if you were Black or a person of color, you were more likely to be sentenced to death here in Alabama. And that still continues to be the case. Alabama is not the highest executor at this time, but Texas, which is a southern state, is one of the highest executors. So through that project, we saw that race and your economic condition were two of the biggest factors in determining whether you were going to be executed, whether you were going to be put on death row. The other project, which is defending people who were sentenced to die as children, up until 2005, it was legal in the United States to execute people under the age of 18 who had been convicted of capital murder. Through a series of cases, organizations like ours were able to have our Supreme Court rule that it was unconstitutional to do that. and that it was also unconstitutional to sentence a child to spend the rest of their life in prison without getting a chance to argue to be released early. We hope that someday that it will be unconstitutional against our Constitution to sentence any child to, life without parole for any crime. Right now, you can still do that. A judge can still do that, but they have to go through a series of factors such as age, home environment, and things like that to determine whether they can sentence someone to life without parole or sentence to die in prison. But what we saw through that project is that if you were a child who was Black or a child of color or a poor child, you were more likely to be harshly sentenced to die in prison. You were more likely to be sent down a pathway where that would happen. So Black children and children of color are more likely to be suspended in school, expelled from school, and treated more harshly in school, which can eventually lead to a pathway to prison. Our other project, which is prison conditions, we go into prisons and interview people about what is happening in those prisons. Alabama has the most violent prisons in the United States at this point. There are deaths, murders, overdoses daily in our prisons, multiple murders per week. And that's usually by staff in the prison violating people who are incarcerated. And it's also incarcerated people violating incarcerated people. So those are our 3 legal projects. And again, we noticed that those projects, through those projects, you are more likely to receive mistreatment and be sent down those pathways if you're a Black or a person of color. So that has caused us and encouraged us to venture out and begin projects where we educate people about the history of racism and economic bias here in the United States. And we start with the Native genocide, the genocide of Native Americans once European settlers settled on our shores here, and then the kidnapping of Africans from Western Africa and bringing them here to this land and enslaving them and enslaving their descendants, and onto the racial terror, lynching, and murder of Black Americans, into segregation, which is the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, and onto what we have today, which is mass incarceration. So in the 1970s, the United States had a prison population of about 300,000 people. Today, we are the top incarcerator with 2.2 million people in prison. And a disproportionate amount of Black people and people of color make up our prison population. And that's not because we are more prone to commit crimes. We're not. It starts in our communities where police officers are more present in our communities, and that leads to more arrest, which leads to more prison sentences and longer prison sentences. And our job, we've taken on the job of educating people about our history and encouraging our individuals and our institutional structures to begin confronting the mistreatment of Black people and people of color and poor people in our country. And we believe that once we begin to confront this history and the mistreatment of Black people and people of color, we will begin to move forward to where we can decarcerate and treat Black people and people of color better than we have been treated in the centuries that we have been here. And we thank you today for having us here. That's a really brief overview of what we do. Our website is www.eji.org. We have numerous videos and reports available that go into much more detail about the overview I've given today, and a lot more about our history, how British history is connected to American history, and how it's intertwined and with Caribbean history, especially during the slave trade, the Atlantic slave trade, and how the United States continued to, enslave people and, created this domestic slave trade even years after the international community banned and abolished the international slave trade. And we encourage you to go to our website to, see how all of this is intertwined. And we thank you so much for having us here to be able to talk with you about the work that we're trying to do here in making America and in turn the world a better place.
Thank you, Ashley Adams, for a really insightful speech and giving us an there has been progress due to organizations like yourselves, but there is still so much more to do. I think I may be a bit echoey, so bear with me a second. I don't know if I... Oh. No, perfect. Yes, so still I'm a bit better now, less echoey. But yes, as I was saying, Ashley Adams, that was an incredible, insightful piece. There is still so much more to do. It's encouraging to see organizations like the Equal Justice Initiative doing what they are doing and fighting for people's rights and for more equality, especially in the criminal justice system. And we know that there's similar type of stats, whether it be in the UK or other places in Europe, as well as the US. So it's very touching to see what they're doing. So I please implore you to go onto their website. I will be going onto it also. And moving on, I am delighted actually to introduce our next speaker at the front here, Master Elaine Banton of 7 Bedford Road Chambers. She specializes in employment and discrimination law, dealing with multi-strand discrimination matters, advising individuals and public bodies on high-level policy matters. Previously Treasurer of the Discrimination Law Association, and previously on the Bar Standards Board Complaints Committee, Master Banton advocates for equality through the Bar Council, but through being co-chair of the Bar Council's Equality, Diversity and Social Mobility Committee, and also being a member of the Temple Women's Forum Committee. So without further ado, please welcome Master Banton.
Thank you. I was slightly daunted as to how I would follow such an enthralling speech that we've just heard and really sobering thoughts. And I know we're going to hear more about these themes later. So I'm not going to tackle all of those disparate matters and inequality, systemic equality issues. What I'd like to talk about is specifically about the profession that we're in and interested in, which is the bar. And before I start that, I just am minded to think about the words of another great Black woman, which is Maya Angelou. We should all know that diversity makes for rich tapestry, and we must understand that all the threads of the tapestry are equal in value, no matter what their color. I'm incredibly proud to be here tonight in person with all of you and seeing a rich tapestry before me. And one of the things that is so important is that the bar is a very strong profession, an important profession in the English society, in British society. And we know that a strong bar is one that is truly reflective of all of the rich talent in society. And that's why it's so important for us to uphold equality, diversity, and inclusion here at Middle Temple. We each of us have unique experiences and perspectives to bring, and they have equal value to this profession. I'm reminded also of the extensive research that shows that the more equality and diversity an organization has, the more successful, the more innovative, the better problem solving that goes ahead. And we know that from McKinsey, Harvard, but also our very own McGregor-Smith review, which in 2017 said that if we could actually bring about equality amongst the Black and ethnic communities in the workplace, we would add £24 billion to the economy, which is a sobering thought again. So those are all the things that I'm very, very interested in terms of the business benefits of diversity, because we know the other aspects in terms of human rights, the fact that before the law, we need to have equality before the law, because without equality, we don't really have effective rule of law. So it's enshrined, it's integral, but it also brings about business benefits as well as being representative. And so in terms of what we've seen since last year, you've heard about some of the work that the race working group at the IN did. There was a survey, recommendations were made, one of which was an exhibition that you see around you, which I am absolutely amazed at, which is, it's just wonderful work on behalf of Barnaby and everyone else who worked towards it. But it's incredibly important because we know representation matters. And when you look around the room and you see people like you, and we celebrate those achievements, it's important. And I'm reminded, because I'm extremely proud as well to have a family member here, myself, tonight, how important family is, because family are the roots of a tree that strengthen us, embolden us, help us to grow and develop. And it's really important for us to look around and realize that in the family of Middle Temple, Black people, ethnic minorities, people of color have always been there and have played an important part. And so what this exhibition is about is formally welcoming, for me, welcoming the family and the contribution of Black and ethnic minorities to the great institution of Middle Temple. So from last year, we saw, of course, Black Lives Matter get huge attention through the terrible events of George Floyd's killing. And we saw culture change move on. We saw discussions of race like never before. And of course, with that, there is some fallout. There is some pushback. And we saw some of that this year. And I know that with Victoria and I, we discussed at another Zoom meeting about some of the negative aspects about that we saw in the Euros. And, you know, we all sort of saw that amongst some quarters, not everyone. And that's part of it. We have to be prepared that to take the steps forwards, there are going to be some that will try and detract from that. But we have to be firm and steadfast on the work that we need to do. And there is a lot of extremely good work that's going across the board in the bar. And certainly in terms of my role at the Bar Council, chairing the Equality, Diversity and Social Mobility Committee, I have had the experience of seeing so much effort being made that I've never seen before. First and foremost, discussions, a willingness to have discussions about how do we improve diversity at the bar. And there are pockets of excellence, we know that. We know that certain quarters of the bar do a lot of the heavy lifting, such as publicly funded areas. And that's been the way for a very long time. But amongst other areas, such as commercial bar, Chancery Bar, there has been a real step change and intention to increase diversity that is to be very much encouraged. And one of the things that I did at the Bar Council, I was very happy to be involved in and very much push as well, which was a similar thing to what I did at the Inn, which was the race working group. Well, at the Bar Council, we founded a race working group to focus on race because it was a moment to do so. And why do that? Because when you want to really improve something, you do need to take some time to stop and focus. But in focusing on race, you have a unique opportunity to also lift the sails in terms of other underrepresented and other disadvantaged groups. And we've certainly seen that already, particularly in terms of socio-economic disadvantage and intersectionality. So that's really, really important. But the race working group at Bar Council included the SBAs, so the bar associations like the Family Bar Association, Criminal Bar Association, Personal Injury Bar Association, Employment Law Bar Association, and so on, as well as the INs, All 4 of the inns are represented, and also the circuits all over the country. And we also included some dynamic grassroots individuals with really important initiatives that were making real change. And this, I think, has been a really important step during the last year or so, where we've been able to coordinate and galvanize some improvements in equality diversity in terms of putting out policy and procedure to advise chambers on how to practically implement initiatives to improve diversity. Things like targeted schemes on mini pupilages to sort of encourage individuals to have experience in chambers, but also to help with their funding so they can actually take up these opportunities. So that has been really positive to see such engagement across the board on that. But one of the things that's happened more recently has been the work of the Race Summit. And in September, we had a meeting which was very well attended. And it was the form of focus groups where groups of barristers, practitioners, self-employed and employed barristers sat together and brainstormed around various issues such as retention, progression, access to the bar, to try and think how we can actually improve things practically to really try and accelerate the change. Because one of the things that we're aware of is that it's slow, and that's absolutely the case. And we want to improve that. So one of the things I wanted to highlight this evening, which I'm very grateful has been put up on the board, is that the second part of the Race Summit is going to take place on the 5th of November in Middle Temple, which we're extremely proud to say it's going to be hosted here. And I want to encourage as many of you to attend as possible. It will be a very interesting evening. Leroy Logan will be speaking, but also there'll be an opportunity to collate all the recommendations from the first summit meeting into a report and present that. And what the Bar Council wants to do is to seek action in the form of recommendations from the Bar Standards Board and other stakeholders. And this is, as we say, crucial in terms of improving statistics on diversity and representation in terms of access, retention, progression, and culture. And that's really important because we need to, and very much want to, effect meaningful change. We want as many of you as possible to come because it's, again, so important for all of our voices to be heard. One of the things, though, that we have already observed, and it's emerged quite clearly from the work at the Bar Council in more recent times, is that one of the most important things that can be done to effect change in terms of progression and retention at the senior levels, appointments to SILP, appointments to judiciary, and other leadership responsibilities, such as head of chambers, etc. One of the most important things we can do is to monitor fair allocation of work and to ensure that that is distributed as equally with equity as possible. We know that there are disparate trends amongst that, and it's a very, very important part because ultimately, whatever you do, if individuals do not get a fair opportunity to have a good income, they won't stay at bar and they will leave. So it's crucial that we actually do this. And in some chambers, you have sets which will share every month what their income is. Now, not all chambers are going to do that. One size doesn't fit all. And so at the Bar Council, we've devised different monitoring tools that allow really some exploration and interrogation and analysis of the data in terms of income. And that was done already in terms of sex, and that's being looked at in many chambers. And again, if you're in chambers already and you're practicing, I would encourage you to have those discussions and say, what are we doing about monitoring of work allocation? At the moment, the Bar Council is working on the race monitoring toolkit. And so that will be coming out as well in the near future, as will others on disability and the other protected characteristics, such as sexual orientation as well, which is incredibly important. So a lot more work is being done. And I think it's important that we all seek to have more access to information and also accountability. I think one of the things that may come out of the Race Summit is how we can get some of these issues to become mandatory from the Bar Standards Board, because as much as it is important to encourage things to be done, ultimately, if we can raise the bottom line, we're going to have even more impact, and that is very important. So I think that's all I want to say for now. Thank you very much for having me.
Master Banton, thank you so much. You are doing so much incredible work, and you really are a champion for diversity and equality at the bar. And having been invited by Master Banton to sit on the Bar Council Race Working Group, I've seen firsthand the sorts of discussions that are happening at the bar, and it's a really exciting time. There is so much being done, and I really encourage you all to come to the Race Summit on the 5th of November. It's important to have your voice heard. As Master Treasurer said, you know, it's important to use that voice and make a difference for the generation that's coming behind us. So thank you so much for that. So we're going to have a quick, and I emphasize the word quick, comfort break, just for 5 minutes. So we will be convening here again. If Mel could just kindly pinpoint exactly what the time will be when we reconvene. We will then have performances by the artist Manny and the pianist Elliot. They are really, really talented. I'm very excited to hear them. And we'll also be having our fantastic speakers. So Dr. Louise Hewitt will be featuring. We have Abimbola Johnson, and we will also have Crystal Marshall, who's a fantastic artist who's featuring at the Saatchi Gallery at the moment, and has kindly agreed to speak this evening. So 5 minutes, and then we'll reconvene, everyone. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you guys so much. We hope you're all feeling refreshed and rejuvenated for the second half of the evening. So now we're going to have a performance from some very talented artists. We have Manny Dwight here with us this evening and Elliot Adbar. So Manny is hailing from diverse roots from Africa and East London. Manny had an extended span in the entertainment, influenced by R&B, soulful and gospel soundscapes. He creates melodies and lyrics that are engaging and uplifting. Manny is also a dynamically ranged creative singer, songwriter, DJ, radio and TV presenter. Influenced by real stories of people from unrepresented backgrounds and disenfranchised groups, he aims for his work to resonate and inspire and empower young people.
Elliot Adbar is a confident and versatile multi-instrumentalist who has been heavily involved in. He was first introduced to music aged 5 when he picked up his first pair of drumsticks and began playing replicas of his favorite drummers. His passion for drumming grew as he was surrounded by top UK musicians and great music. A few years later, Elliot picked up a keyboard and bass guitar, and his musical journey continued. Elliot has played a range of performances on stages of various sizes and enjoys playing with several bands, bass and piano, both in the UK and abroad. Elliot has worked over 10 years with a number of events, ranging from weddings to corporate venue events, and also the Wedding and Leeds Festival. He has also been musically directing a number of them, so we are delighted to have them both here tonight to give you a beautiful performance.
Hello. Ooh. Good evening. Hey, thank you so much for inviting us. It's so great to be here. It's amazing what you guys are doing and the amazing speakers. Great to hear you guys as well. We're really excited. I'm Manny D. White, like Bintro said, and this is Elliot. We're going to sing a couple songs to you today, tonight. But the first one is a bit reflective. It's by amazing artist. Anyone heard of Whitney Houston? You know. Okay. So if you know it, sing along, hum along. You know, we ain't gonna interrupt you. We want you to engage, to have fun. But yeah, let's go on a journey, okay?
Oh. strong. In you I can be strong. I look to you. I look to you, yeah. Oh, and when melodies are gone, in you I hear a song. I look to you. Oh, yeah. Oh.
Thank you very much.
I'm sure you'll all agree with me. That was absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so, so much. That's exactly what we needed during the course of the evening. Thank you, gentlemen. So without further ado, our next speaker is Dr. Louise Hewitt. Dr. Louise Hewitt is a director of the Innocence Project London and a senior lecturer in law at the University of Greenwich. Louise joined the School of Law in 2011, and having previously studied at the University of Greenwich as an undergraduate herself, before co-founding the Innocence Project. The organisation became a charity in August 2012 and was the first UK member of the International Innocence Network, based in New York. As a senior lecturer, Louise teaches law of evidence, tort law, and transnational organisational legal networks. As well as being a senior fellow of the Higher Education Academy, Louise received the honour of being made a National Teaching Fellow this year, so congratulations. And Louise's research interests include disability, hate crime, and innocent legal education. So welcome, Louise.
My slides. Yeah. Brilliant, thank you. Thank you very much for having me here tonight, and thank you, Emma, for extending the invite to me and for being the most communicative organiser I think I've ever come across, so thank you so much. No, they were very informative, it was great. So yeah, my name is Dr. Louise Hewitt. I'm director of the Innocence Project London, and I co-founded that organisation, or this organisation, and it's something that I'm very, very passionate about. When I was told I only had 10 minutes to speak, I was slightly panicked because us academic lawyers like a longer time to speak about absolutely everything. But I'm going to try really hard to be friends with brevity tonight, so I will keep it short and try to get my key messages across. Next slide, please. So what I'd like to talk to you about tonight is a little bit about what the Innocence organisation like the Innocence Project London does. I'd like to talk about the clients that we see convicted of joint enterprise and the impact of innocence work on our students. Next slide. So as Emma said, the Innocence Project London is based at the University of Greenwich. We are one of 69 members of the Global Innocence Network, which started in America. One of only 3 innocence organisations that trade as innocence projects in this country. And law and criminology students work alongside 7 wonderful pro bono lawyers that work with me. And they work on the cases of convicted individuals who have maintained their innocence but exhausted the appeals process. So their only recourse for maintaining their innocence and to get their case back to the Court of Appeal is through the Criminal Cases Review Commission. All of our cases are assessed for eligibility. The Criminal Cases Review Commission, for those that don't know in the room, require fresh evidence or a new legal argument. And whilst we would like to take every case that was presented to us, it's simply not possible. I get on average between 5 to 8 applications a week from around the country. Although we're called the Innocence Project London, our applicants come from all over the country. The cases that are assessed, as I've said, to determine eligibility, and when they're not found eligible, that's not a judgment as to the validity of someone's claim of innocence. It's more so a question of whether there has been the potential for fresh evidence or a new legal argument to be found. We work very closely with the Criminal Cases Review Commission. We do not take their place, as has sometimes been suggested in the press. We work alongside them. I sit on their stakeholder group, and they speak quite a lot at the events that I set up about their work and about how we work with them. But more importantly, what we do, what the Innocence Project London does, is a great form of clinical legal education. The students that come through and work on the Innocence Project are hopefully the students that are going to be sitting in this room or sitting in various inns of court around the country. And that is really, really important. And I will read, I was hoping to have a student here tonight with me. However, she's caught that horrible cold that's going around at the moment that keeps flooring people. So she hasn't been able to come, but she's given me permission to read something out, which I will do. Next slide, please. So 67% of our clients are Black men, and they have been convicted under murder using the principle of joint enterprise. I'm going to make the assumption that most people in the room know about joint enterprise, but for those that don't, it is a principle that is used in cases to give a secondary party culpability as for the actions of the principal. And the clients that come, next slide please, whose cases that we work on, we see a common theme in those cases, and that is issues with evidence and how their evidence has been handled in the criminal justice system. And I've got two examples that I'd just like to briefly speak about. Case one was a shooting at Notting Hill Carnival in August 2004, and the prosecution asserted a gang narrative, although no direct evidence was presented in court. Eyewitness identification evidence was used, but was produced 16 months after the initial incident took place. It was produced by someone who was a covert human intelligence source and who had met their handler in the months of September to December at least 8 times immediately after the incident. And our client's name was not identified during those handling sessions at all. It was identified 16 months later. Our client had an alibi, which wasn't allowed in court, and as so often is the case when the clients come to us, their paperwork is their currency. And unfortunately, his paperwork has been through a number of people, a number of lawyers, a number of student-led innocence organisations, and it has got lost. Transcription company no longer have the recordings or any of the transcripts, and sometimes the access to our clients because sometimes they simply just don't want to talk to us. So we have no idea why his alibi evidence wasn't allowed into court. There were 2 trials for this conviction, and all of them were young Black men. They were all convicted under this gang narrative, and the 2 trials happened 2 years apart. We now have confession evidence from 2 of those people, one from the first trial, one from the second trial, and we also have independent alibi evidence for our clients. But those were the issues he faced at the time when presented with the principle of joint enterprise, and the joint enterprise principle tied both the trials together. Our second case was an attempted murder in May 2008 in Reading, so it's a murder and attempt murder. No actual role was attributed to our client, and there was no footage of our client carrying a knife. The CCTV from the chicken shop he was in, although he told the police in his initial police interview that he was in the chicken shop, they visited that chicken shop a week later, and it wasn't able to be recovered because it had already been recorded over. He was not picked out on any identification parade, and there were several that took place. And none of the eyewitnesses gave a description of him at all. And as I said, he wasn't picked out on the ID parades. His conviction was based on joint enterprise, which he didn't dispute being at the scene at the time. He was out, he was tried with some of his co-defendants, but some of those co-defendants were the people that used the knives. And again, he was depicted as being part of that when the judge in the case identified a certain line of sight in the high street, and because they all walked past a certain area, that was depicted as being part of the joint enterprise. So they are just some of the issues that the young Black men whose cases we work on, they face, and they are reoccurring themes in innocent cases that we see. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned earlier, the impact of our work does land on our students. And next slide. Anecdotally, I've been told for years while I've been doing this by alumni about the impact that it has. A lot of them do go on to work in the criminal justice system. I've got alumni working in probation. I've got them working in charities. One set up their own podcast and they podcast on issues, miscarriages of justice. One writes for the Justice Gap. A couple are barristers. Some are paralegals. Some have just qualified as solicitors. So what they all tell me is that this type of work gives them a critical perspective about the criminal justice system, a critical perspective that they wouldn't otherwise get. And their perception of how access to justice is and how justice should be done has been shaped by their work on the project. And they develop an empathy as well, a unique empathy, I think, with convicted individuals, something that you don't often get or you don't get an opportunity to have. Next slide. They learn whilst on the project that their initial response is to attribute a moral value to their situation or to the client's situation. And that often manifests as they must be guilty because I wouldn't behave like that. And I hear that pretty much every single year. But they learn that this is different and separate from the law. And they also start to realize how their own bias can affect their ability to see facts objectively. Detail is everything, and they learn that. And they become aware that those without money to fund representation beyond trial and appeal find it very, very hard to access justice. And as those figures show, unfortunately, most of those that come to us are young Black men. So Aggie, Agatha is her name, but she goes by on her Zoom account, it's Aggie Cakes, it's a standing joke. And she was supposed to be here today, but she has caught that horrible cold. And she's allowed me or given me permission to read out an excerpt from the book that I got my students to put together last year. I wanted to find an innovative way to capture how innocence work made them feel, but also to show off about them, because I couldn't run this organisation without them, and they are absolutely brilliant. There's generations of them out there, and they are marvellous. And so I got them to learn about autobiography. I myself learned about autobiography, and they wrote autobiographical reflections, and I put them in this book, which has been published, and it's on our website, and I've got a few copies which I will leave with Emma, and in fact Grace got one earlier on. But Aggie wanted me to read this out. Now, Aggie was a second year student when she wrote this. Agatha was a second year student. She was a victim of grooming and sexual assault. And she applied for the Innocence Project because she wanted to become a lawyer so she could protect young women like her from having the experience that she went through, and by ensuring that someone would believe their story, which was something that she didn't have. And I will just read this last excerpt out because it's probably one of the most impactful I've read. The case itself is unique and has led me to be more open-minded and to think twice before I make snap judgments or decisions about a person, simply because they have been charged with a crime. I now question everything. I genuinely believe that working on the IPL has made me a less judgmental person and, in a way, has helped me come to terms with my own traumatic experience. I wish it was something everyone had the opportunity to do. Working for the past 8 months with some of the most amazing people who have come from all walks of life, all striving to help individuals who at this moment need the IPL to help change their lives, is something I'm very fortunate to be able to do. My own experience, alongside the additional things I've learned whilst working with the IPL, has completely changed my outlook on the criminal justice system. It has made me more passionate to be a solicitor one day. Our legal system might be flawed, but I believe it is our responsibility to hold those in the system accountable to prevent potential miscarriages of justice occurring in the future. Next slide. Thank you so much for having me. If you want to find out more on the last slide, these are our details, and it's a real privilege to be here. So thank you.
Oh, that was incredible. Thank you, Dr. Louise Hewitt, for informing us of all the awesome work the Innocence Project is doing. And it's so true in terms of sometimes you have an idea of how things work, and then in reality, it works other ways. So it's incredibly heartwarming to see that you're out there fighting justice for other people, and that you have such an awesome team behind you. So now I would like to move to our next speaker. Abimbola Johnson practices at 25 Bedford Row, where she focuses on serious crime, professional discipline, inquest and inquiry work. She is a regular commentator on our criminal justice system and racial discrimination in particular. She has featured in the BBC, the Metro, LE UK, Channel 4 News, Bloomberg, and Thomas Retner's. She also appeared on academic panels and webinars for Cambridge University, the LSC, where her writing features in the LLB undergraduate reading list, and in Inner Temple, where she volunteers as an advocacy trainer. Abby won the 2008 Diversity Legal Awards Rising Star Chambers category. She was a finalist in the 2018 Black British Business Awards and has been shortlisted as a future leader in the 2020 Chambers UK Bar Awards. I'd like to welcome to the stage Abiola Johnson.
Hi guys, I'm really happy to be here. Intros always make you sound super impressive, don't they? Do you want your first sentence to be equally impressive? And I'm not sure I quite got there. I am actually a bit of an imposter. I'm not a Middle Temple member. I'm from next door, the Inner Temple. But that does make it all the more special to be asked to speak here, particularly when I look around and I see how many impressive Black members of Middle Temple there are. I'm really honoured that you guys chose me to speak here to all of you. So Black History Month, October, it's my favourite month, not just because my birthday is in October, but also because Black history is really special. I know that the month itself can be seen as being quite controversial. There's always discussions around whether or not it segregates Black history from mainstream history and whether in the end it actually undermines the purpose that it sets out to achieve. But from my perspective, I did history at A-level. My curriculum never covered prominent Black British contributions to history. And in fact, we actually went across the Atlantic and studied the American Civil Rights Movement, but never the British contribution to the transatlantic slave trade. We studied the World Wars and the Industrial Revolution, but never the history of cotton and where the cotton that funded and fueled a lot of the Industrial Revolution actually came from. But we learned, of course, about the fact that there was the emancipation of slavery, that there was the abolitionist movement, but not the fact that Britain had really taken the transatlantic slavery to the stage that it got to. We didn't learn either about the histories of any of the countries that made up the Commonwealth of Britain, and really were what was used to make Britain so great. As a British Nigerian, however, a lot of that history came through from my own upbringing. I learned about the status of Nigeria, about how wealthy it was in terms of resources, about the fact that our history isn't just a history of slavery and oppression, that our history is our art, our culture, our music, our scientific advantages, and so on. So it's really wonderful to see this event being mixed with uplifting Black members of the inns, but also seeing beautiful music and so on being played, because Black history to me is joyful rather than oppressive. Having said all of that, I'm here to talk to you guys about racism, and in particular to talk about the anti-racist work that I have been taking part in. I don't know about you guys, but I really found over the last couple of years that this movement towards speaking about racism much more openly was, on the one hand, really cathartic, and on the other hand, it was quite tiring. I felt like there were different levels of progress that people who wanted to make these contributions to conversations had made internally, and that very often I was having to measure my reaction to people who had suddenly become interested in this topic that I had been living through for 34 years. And really it culminated in February when I gave birth to my son. Right up until 2 weeks after my due date, because we went over, I was actually defending somebody at the Old Bailey in a murder trial. I'm Black, my leader is Black, and our defendant was Black. Every defendant in the dock was Black. Everybody else at the Bailey was white. The jury was white, the judge was white, prosecutors were white, our co-defending counsel were white, bar one person. And I thought, I just can't work in this profession for another 30 years doing these cases, only to move one seat to the left and still be contributing to the same system that I'm operating in at this moment in time. I'm tired of seeing young Black boys being the bread and butter of my practice. And I can't continue to do that and to have a Black son and not have worked towards changing the system that he's going to grow up in as well. So there was an advert that I saw after having given birth and being on maternity leave to become the chair of an independent scrutiny and oversight board for the police's action plan on inclusion and race. A really catchy title, I know, thank you. I call it the ISOB because I'm cool. I saw the advert and the response in my social circles was cynical, and it was a cynicism that I shared, to be honest, because time and time again, we see these diversity initiatives and we see these lists of actions that people are going to take. We see these reading lists, we see these black squares going up in social media, we see these empty corporate statements which are put out, particularly after the murder of George Floyd. And I thought, well, what's going to be different about this time? But I did apply. And the response in my social circles, one friend messaged me concerned that the coverage about my appointment carried the implication that my appointment alone showed that the police was becoming anti-racist. And he texted me and said, I may find myself hard blocked at every turn, worn down by frustration, or have no real power, if not all three. I had another friend who called me to check if I had an exit strategy ready, and for if and or when I became exhausted by the role, and to make sure that I had a good support network in place to help me out. And to explain that it definitely was a cynicism that I shared. About a year ago, I wrote a piece for The Guardian in which I wrote about the safety concerns that a group of my friends had, a predominantly Black WhatsApp group, around whether or not our friend ought to have called the police on a potential incident of domestic violence that she had witnessed. She lives in Brixton, and there was a couple who were outside her door having quite an aggressive argument. She was really worried about the behaviour of the man towards the women, and they were a Black couple. And there was basically this conversation that ensued in our WhatsApp group about whether or not she should call the police, because we were worried that what may occur would be that the police would escalate rather than de-escalate the situation, but also what may happen to her if she got the wrong end of the stick and actually it turned into some sort of issue around her. And I just thought to myself, this is the kind of conversation that I only have with my Black friends. I just simply would not have this conversation with any of my white friends. And it's been a little bit frustrating, if I'm completely honest, to see the reaction of predominantly white women to the murder of Sarah Everard, and the fact that suddenly these conversations are coming to the fore in social circles that have never really had to think about that aspect of interactions with the police in the way that we always have and often have from when we were little. I'm sure a lot of us grew up having the talk with our parents about what to do if and when there's an interaction with the police. Should you answer the questions? Should you walk away? Should you try and call an adult? Should you feel safe? Should you not? Suddenly, a lot of people are having those very same conversations because of what happened, unfortunately, to Sarah Everard, and the realization that there was nothing that she could have done which would have changed that because of the inherent power dynamic that you see between an interaction between a police officer and a civilian. So I wrote that article in The Guardian, and that was long before she had been murdered. And interestingly enough, a Black Conservative MP tweeted, which he's now deleted because he obviously realized that he was being a moron, that my article was disingenuous. And he said that it fueled division. There were defensive replies that came through some anonymous, of course, Twitter accounts, arguing that my writing was inaccurate, and that despite my decade-long experience as a criminal defense barrister, I didn't understand how policing and the criminal justice system worked. Because that's, let's be honest, how discussions around racial disparity and racism often pan out. There are calls for evidence to prove a problem that you have either directly experienced or know that others have experienced, or that there is already a plethora of evidence to support. And then when that doesn't work, people often then resort to attacking the person who's raising the issue of racism itself, and rarely is the response to concentrate on tackling racism. But we know that evidence shows that racism in policing is very real. Earlier this year, the Home Affairs Committee released an update report on the police's progress against the 70 recommendations that were made in the Macpherson report that 22 years ago famously described the Metropolitan Police as institutionally racist. And it found that confidence amongst Black people in the police has fallen in recent years, and that the racial gap in confidence in policing has grown. The Office of National Statistics figures leading up to March 2020, so this is before the peak of the Black Lives Matter movement last year, highlighted that there was a 10% trust deficit amongst Black adults, which widened to 20% when you consider only Black Caribbean adults. And I don't think that it's any surprise that generationally, people of Black Caribbean descent tend to go back further in Britain than people of Black African descent, and they are the group that have the least trust in the police service. They found that little has changed in terms of non-white recruitment and retention for the decade since the last update on Macpherson. They found that there's a clear racial disparity in the number of officers who are dismissed from their positions and are subject to internal disciplinary processes. And of course, that disparities in stop and search are still unexplained, they're still unjustified, and that recommendations which have been made by other bodies to improve the way that stop and search has been used is still not being adopted by all of the forces. And in fact, there are several senior policing officers who had to accept that issues that had been recommended to be improved in Macpherson have proven intractable, and that overall progress has not been fast enough. So I was worried when I applied for this role that maybe it would just be another tick box, that they might just use my face and my identity to be able to point to whenever somebody accused the police of racism moving forwards. It looked to me like it might be more of the same, of being asked to fix a problem that wasn't created by Black people. Until a friend in that very same WhatsApp group that I'd written that Guardian article about posted the job and urged me to apply for the role. I looked into it. It's an initiative which has been generated by the MPCC, which is the group of all of the 43 police forces across England and Wales. All of the chief constables have come together and agreed to back this plan of action. It's also backed by the College of Policing, which is the body that sets all of the standards for policing nationally. And the role isn't to create the plan, but it's just to monitor its progress and to call out when it hasn't been met. So it has all the hallmarks of everything that I was looking for: a push for institutional change, something which will hopefully make a lasting impact, and something that I can turn to my son in years to come and say that at the very least, when the opportunity arose, I really did try to make a difference to ensure that he's not faced with many of the problems that I see a lot of my clients having to battle day to day. So since being appointed, I have enlisted the use of an executive search agency. I've drafted terms of reference. We've got a decision matrix in place. And also I've managed to argue for a raise for all of the board members who will be coming along. So rather than being paid only £300 a day, they're going to be paid £400 per day for the work that they do. I'm also recruiting people who would be interested in coming onto the forum, which will feed into my board and hopefully keep us in touch with what's happening on the grassroots level and make sure that we are escalating that to the right people, because we're always going to have a seat in the room. And I want to make sure that the matters that we bring to the table are the matters that really need the attention and the unfettered ear that we are going to have access to. I've had meetings so far with police chiefs, with senior members of the College of Policing. They've all been positive, but they often are until you start actually scrutinising them to their face. So let's see what I say this time next year if you guys invite me back and I'm a little bit grayer, hunched over and a bit more tired. But that's all to say, I'm feeling quite hopeful at this moment in time. It's really great to be at a point where I can say that I'm doing something that I think will actually have an impact. And I also wanted to point out, isn't it great to be standing in Middle Temple Hall with the smell of jollof rice hanging over us, with portraits of Black people looking down at us on either side, and with a feeling of hope in the air. I'm just thinking how very different that feels to the 26th of May, 2020, the day after we all learned that George Floyd had died in America. So yeah, I hope to come back here next year, guys, and to be able to update you all on the progress that I've hopefully made, in holding the police accountable to their anti-racist goals. Thank you very much. Abby, every time I hear you speak, I'm in such awe. Honestly, you are so real and you really highlight the really big issues that sometimes people can shy away from. I think it was so important to address the issues of the UK's role in slavery. I think that's something that's definitely washed over at times. And I can't think of a better person to be on the scrutiny board, honestly. I know you will hold everyone accountable. It was also wonderful to hear you speak about being a mother as well. I have my wonderful son here tonight, Kai Hughes. Hello, Kai. I told him I was going to be embarrassed, he's been warned. But I too worry about the system that he's going to find himself in. And you have to have those talks with them at a really young age, which is awful, but it's the reality that we live in. And so thank you for addressing that as well. We are very happy to have you here, even though you're in a temple, the Hufflepuff. I say the Middle Temple are the Gryffindor. But that's just me, I'm biased. So without further ado, we've got one last speaker this evening, and it will be Crystal Marshall, who is a fantastic artist. She has just had an exhibition at the Saatchi Gallery. She's a fine artist. She works with oil, mixed media and photography. And she has studied all around the world, including France, the USA and Dubai. So Crystal, welcome. Thank you for being here. And just before the event concludes, we'll have one more performance and then we'll have networking. So Crystal, come to the stage.
Thank you, Emma, for that introduction and for extending an invitation to me. I'm really honored to be here, and I'm really elated to be speaking tonight. I'm Master Elaine Banton's cousin, and I'm really proud to be related to her. It was really inspiring to hear her passion and her talk, and hear her talk about her drive, and just to be here tonight. I'm really excited about that. So yes, my name is Crystal Marshall, and I was here currently for a show at the Saatchi Gallery. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and I came here just for the show. This is my first time in London, and it's been a wonderful experience. So as stated earlier, I paint in oil primarily, but I also do mixed media. I also do photography, sculpture, and photography. So I'm sort of interdisciplinary at the moment. I think the role of an artist is to reflect society, and I tend to isolate myself from cultural norms to show society what I see from my perspective as an active observer. And I believe as a Black female, telling my story is an experience in the modern day African diaspora is important. So I take a narrative and portraiture as an approach in order to have this dialogue with people in the local community and internationally as well. And I consider this to be my personal mission as an artist. I include themes in my work such as oppression, victimization, displacement, exclusion, and cultural and societal disparities and spiritual reconciliation. As an Afro-Caribbean immigrant that has been sort of hybrid over the years, I feel my perspective is a unique one. And as I stated earlier, I exhibited works on these particular themes at Saatchi, which was an extreme accomplishment for me. I never thought I would ever be able to show my art in that capacity at such a young stage in my career. And it was a huge opportunity for me as a Black female during Black History Month to share my work with people from London and all over the world. I met so many people. It was such a priceless experience, which I couldn't have done without the help and support of my family. And I'm so grateful to be here tonight. Thank you.
Crystal, thank you so much for sharing with us. Your artwork is absolutely stunning, and I know for somebody who's not very artistic, I'm always jealous. I don't have that skill. So we're just going to have a quick Q&A session. Please don't be shy. Those in the audience, feel free to put your hand up, and we'll bring the mic over to you. We have had some questions in the Zoom chat, so we'll try and get through as many of those as possible. And after the short Q&A, we're going to have a last performance, and then the evening will conclude. So is there anybody who would like to ask a question in the audience? Don't be shy. Great.
Hi, my question's for Abiola. Sorry to put you on the spot. My name is Kitan. Hi. So my question is, how hard or how easy do you find it to sort of compartmentalize your feelings when dealing with cases of injustice?
Oh, it's really hard, yeah. I'm really good at like keeping a straight face in court, and then my husband has to deal with the mess afterwards when I get home. No, I think it's really difficult. It really takes its toll. And actually, to be honest, I think that's one of the reasons that well-being has started to come to the fore at the bar. There's a lot of stuff that we internalize. And I think that's why, in particular, 2020 for me was a really, really tricky year. I think from 2018, there was a period where I'd say 2 or 3 times a month, you'd wake up to a headline, wouldn't you, of a Black boy or man being killed at the hands of the police, some sort of injustice. And after a point, I just became utterly, utterly exhausted. And I actually ended up sending an email around my chambers about the fact that we had a number of Black members of chambers, and that if people weren't aware that you know, it really was taking its toll, because unlike others, I'd read those headlines and then I'd go into court and I'd see those dynamics being played out in the courtroom. And you also feel this sort of level of guilt of being a representative of that very same justice system. And then, you know, of living in a house with the mortgage that you pay from the fees that you earn from representing people within that justice system as well, but never really feeling as though you're actually changing the system. The number of times I've had to advise a client that I'm really sorry, but, you know, what you're raising doesn't actually provide you with a defense in law, or, you know, saying, yeah, I understand that situation, I understand the difficulty that you're in, but that explanation isn't good enough. It does take its toll. And I think that is something as well to consider if any of you are students, about the area of law that you choose to practice in. If I were to go back and think about the area of law that I would specialize in, I'm not sure if I would just do straight crime. I still would have an element of a criminal practice in there, but I think coupling that up with something like a public law practice as well, so that you actually can do something about pushing for systemic change mentally, I think there's something in that which is really useful and really helpful, so you don't just feel like another cog in the wheel. But I won't lie to you, it is tricky. It can become quite difficult. It's really important to make sure that you have a very good support network surrounding you when you go into a job like this, because it can take its toll after a while.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else in the audience who'd like to ask a question? Fabulous.
Thank you very much. Thank you. This question is to Master Elaine Banton. It's regarding the criminal justice system and basically the legal aid system. We know that the legal aid system now is under a lot of strain, and a lot of people basically now are, you know, struggling in terms of finding funding for their legal aid. So therefore they don't really fund barristers to the level that is needed. But I want to know how that affects the Black community, and how you think that we can improve that, and how you've seen it in your own experience affect the Black community and the BAME population going forward, and how you think we can improve this as well. Thank you.
So which of our speakers would like to address that? If you just, Lane?
Yes, well, I'll certainly answer as best as I can. It's a really big point in terms of legal aid generally, and in terms of criminal legal aid, both from the perspective of criminal barristers, which was something I touched on earlier, in terms of the fact that publicly funded bar are under so much pressure, and in terms of income, the disparities are exacerbated when you look at race and sex. And so the lowest earning barristers are Black women. And that is something that we are trying very hard to ensure that there is transparency and equity amongst that. And of course, there's ramifications for the community, wider community, in terms of representation. And Abby talked very eloquently and passionately about that already. And I think so much needs to be done to address all of these really important systemic issues. And one of the important things is to have more scrutiny and accountability to bring about change. So, I mean, that's really what I would say from my perspective. Maybe Abby wants to comment.
Yeah, I think access to justice is a real problem at the moment, and I don't think anyone in government really has a grip on it. And unfortunately, I don't think the opposition party really is prioritising it in the way that they ought to either. I don't know if you guys saw, but like David Lammy was asserting that law firms should now do a minimum number of pro bono hours, for example, which is much more of a sticking plaster approach than well, why would they need to do those pro bono hours in the first place? Which is, I think people aren't really asking the right questions at this moment in time. So the Labour manifesto does have within it a push for increased funding into the legal aid system. If they were to look at it as a proper business case, you'd save way more money by funding the system properly in the first place. And COVID has only exacerbated those issues. The waiting lists for criminal and for family matters, which are the two areas that really highlight disparities in justice, are woefully long at this moment in time. And I can't really see it improving very much in the short term. So yeah, I think the immediate answers to that is we're going to see a rise in the use of law centres. You're going to see corporate lawyers who don't have the relevant areas of experience now having to kind of try and fill those areas of gap. And you're also going to see a brain drain from publicly funded areas too. Going to be tempted to go outside of publicly funded areas of law. I think unfortunately what's going to need to happen before things change is that the system's going to need to come to a complete halt for it to move up the priority list and for government and those who have the decision-making power to do what they need to do. The fact is that people day to day don't think about how the systems function, because that the average person doesn't think about, oh, let's make sure that people who are accused of crime have fair trials. That's not the reason they go to the voting box. So it's not the reason that politicians are going to put forward for them to be elected. So we need a more engaged public electorate. We need people to actually be much more aware of the ramifications it has. And I guess as members of the bar, those are things that we can work on doing, having those conversations with our friends, writing in, making sure that we are like pressuring our MPs to take it really seriously so that when those matters become voting issues in Parliament, they actually have that on their agenda and they realise that it's something that will be a voting issue for their local electorate. I would always encourage members of the bar to try to become involved in local politics in some way so that you can raise awareness about those matters in those ways. But it's an area that I know that our professional bodies are pushing forward for, but it's kind of out of our hands until politicians take it really seriously.
Thank you so much, Abby. So do we have any final questions? Otherwise, yep, fantastic.
Good evening. So my question is for Master Elaine as well as Abimbola Johnson. So what would your advice be to someone who is pursuing an area of law which is largely underrepresented? When I say that, I mean that within the top 8 chambers within this specific area of law, which I'm not going to mention, there are less than 5 Black barristers. What would your advice be for someone who's trying to pursue pursue a career within that area?
Master Treasurer?
Well, I'm not quite sure what area you're talking about, but I think it might be one in which I have a passing involvement. My clear advice to you is never give up. It is a lesson that I learned myself. I mean, when I was giving the lesson, the introduction to the new students, one of the things I said to them is that, as you will go through your career, you will encounter disappointment. It is very rare I have ever met anybody who's had a smooth path. And if it's something that you really want to do, then don't be deterred. If I can give a personal example, when I did my pupillage, and pupillage then was easier to get because we didn't pay people to become pupils. You had to finance yourself. The real difficulty was about becoming a tenant. And so there were 4 of us competing for one tenancy, and they turned 3 of us down. One of them is Jeffrey Boss, who is now Master of the Rolls. The second is Patricia Scotland, who was the first female Black Attorney General and is now Secretary General of the Commonwealth. And the third was me, and I'm Master Treasurer. So you know what? We took that failure and we laughed in its face and we carried on, and here we are. So if that's what you want to do, go ahead and do it, and don't let obstacles stand in your way. That's my tip.
Very well said. Thank you so much, Master Treasurer. So I do apologise. I know we're running behind time. Thank you so much to our panellists. We're going to move on to the last act for the evening now. Manny and Elliot, I'll welcome you back to the stage. Please do feel free to stay for drinks afterwards. Me and Mike and Victoria will formally close just a moment.
Hey, oh, amazing. Hasn't today been great?
It's been great, incredible. We have got some songs that we want to sing for you. Some of them you might know, and we're really encouraging you to sing along. We want you to get involved. Have we got some hands to clap today? Feel free to clap, feel free to click along. So we're going to take it to some old school classics, and we'll sprinkle in a few of the new ones as well. But yeah, let's start with this one. Sometimes in our lives, we all have sorrow. But if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me. Come on, let me hear that. When you're not, come on. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna somebody for me. Lean on me when you're not strong. Come on, come on, you get it like that. I'll help you. Help sound so lovely for it won't be. I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. You just call on your brother if you need a hand. Come on, lean on. You just call on your lawyer if you need some help. We all need to lean on me. When you're not strong, I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. Oh, it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. When the night has come, and the land is dark, and the moon is the only night they'll see. You know, no, I won't be afraid. No, be afraid. Just as long as you stand by me. So darling, stand by me. Come on, sing it. By me, stand. You don't need no other body. You don't need no other body. Only if you hold my body. You don't need no other body. You might know this one. Everybody say, yeah, 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 yeah. Come on, let me hear it. Yeah, 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 yeah. Baby, there ain't no mountain high enough. Come on. Ain't no mountain, ain't no river, ain't no river wide enough to keep me from getting to you. 'Cause baby, there ain't no ain't no river, ain't no river wide enough to keep me from getting to you, baby. That's all right. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Really.
Thank you so much. Manny and Elliot, what a way to end the evening. I know that I knew a lot of those amazing tunes. I was singing my heart out. Sorry about the people sitting behind me. I just wanted to take an opportunity today just to thank everybody involved in making this event happen. I want to thank my wonderful colleagues, Grace Kelly and Merlene George. They are parts of MTYBA. So we've got the Vice President and the Pre-Privilege Officer doing all the savvy tech. I also wanted to thank Samuel Akabume this evening. He is our photographer. He does all of our MTYBA events. He is so wonderful. He edits all the footage and everything. So we thank you so much, Sam, for being here again. I also quickly wanted to thank Michael Polak, who is the president of MTYBA this year, sitting over there. Mike has been a really fantastic president for MTYBA this year. Whenever we say that we want to do an event, we've got this idea and we've got that, he always supports us and is like, go ahead, do it. So thank you to Merlene and Mike for always supporting all of the ideas that we have. I also just wanted to thank Angel Catering for the lovely food, Middle Temple for the wonderful drinks, so please enjoy some more of that afterwards. And I also just wanted to thank Victoria Makungu. She has been a wonderful co-host. It's been a pleasure to work with you at MTSA. And last but not least, I wanted to thank my wonderful family, my son Kai, my mum, Kerry, and my sister-in-law, Paulina, for being here tonight. Basically, all of you will know firsthand, those who are practicing at the bar now or those of you who are doing your BPTC course, a lot of blood, sweat and tears goes into it. It takes a lot of hard work and you need the support of your family during that period. So for those who are doing their studies this year, best of luck. For those who've completed it during lockdown, you're heroes. I don't know how you did exams online, well done. And for those practicing, keep doing the good fight.
So, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to all of our awesome speakers tonight for really bringing their A game and issues, and then continuing to fight the good fight and also display their complete artistic work. I'd like to thank you as our fabulous audience for being so engaged and just really giving your heart to everything that's gone on tonight. And yeah, just thanks to Middle Temple for this awesome exhibit, Master Treasurer, fabulous as always. And yes, I hope you guys can socialize with us for a little bit. We've got some sandwiches, breakfast, some fruit, I think, and then some drinks.
And come and enjoy the exhibition. Tell your friends about it. It's a wonderful thing that the Inn are doing. Thank you, Barnaby, again. Please do encourage everyone to come and see these wonderful heroes. Good night. Great.